The morning it all started, I was making coffee in the kitchen of the house I'd lived in for 37 years. The same kitchen where I'd nursed Liam through childhood fevers, where I'd helped him with homework at the scarred wooden table, where I'd cried alone after his father left us when Liam was 12. The investment in that house had been more than financial. It was emotional, physical, spiritual. Every mortgage payment had been a sacrifice. Every repair a labor of love. Liam was sitting at that same table, scrolling through his phone while his wife Charlotte bustled around packing boxes. They'd moved in 6 months earlier after Charlotte's company downsized, and they lost their apartment. It was supposed to be temporary, just until they got back on their feet. Liam's software consulting business was picking up again, and Charlotte had landed a position at a medical device startup. They were talking about venture capital funding and market expansion. The future looked bright. "Mom, we need to talk," Liam said without looking up from his screen. I set down my coffee mug, the one with "World's Best Mom" that he'd given me for Mother's Day 10 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. "What's on your mind, honey?" Charlotte cleared her throat. "It's about my mother, Cora. She's been diagnosed with early-stage dementia and she can't live alone anymore. The doctors say she needs a stable environment, somewhere familiar." I nodded sympathetically. "That's terrible news. Have you looked into assisted living facilities? I know the costs can be overwhelming, but there are some excellent places in town. My friend Helen's mother-in-law is at Sunset Manor and she loves it there." Liam finally looked up. "That's just it, Mom. We can't afford those places. Not with Mom having to cut back her hours for treatment and therapy sessions. The financial management alone is going to be a nightmare." "I understand it's difficult," I said carefully. "But surely there are programs, Medicare benefits." Liam's voice had that edge I remembered from his teenage years. "We're not asking for your opinion on our financial situation. We're telling you what's going to happen." The kitchen suddenly felt smaller. Charlotte was avoiding my eyes, stacking dishes with unnecessary vigor. Liam leaned back in his chair, my chair at my table, and crossed his arms. "Charlotte's mom is moving into the master bedroom. You'll need to move your things to the garage. We've already cleared it out. Set up a bed, a dresser. There's a space heater for winter." I stared at him. "The garage? Come on, Mom. You're always saying you don't need much. You've told me 100 times that material things don't matter, that family is what counts." "Well, now you can prove it." The words hit like a physical blow. Charlotte had stopped moving entirely, frozen with a plate halfway to the box. The silence stretched between us, filled with 37 years of history, of sacrifice, of love that was apparently worthless. "Liam," I said slowly, "this is my house." He laughed. Actually laughed. "Is it though? When was the last time you made a mortgage payment? When was the last time you paid for groceries, utilities, insurance? Charlotte and I have been covering everything for months. We're practically your landlords at this point. You asked me to stop contributing so we could help you save money. Yeah, and now we need that help returned. Mom, you're 62. You're not working. You spend your days reading, gardening, and doing whatever it is you do. Charlotte's mother is sick. She needs care, medical attention, a proper room." I looked around the kitchen, taking in the morning light streaming through windows I'd washed countless times. The herbs growing on the sill that I'd planted. The family photos on the refrigerator spanning decades. Photos of Liam's graduation, his wedding, holidays we'd celebrated in this very room. When I asked today, Charlotte said quietly, "My mother arrives this afternoon." Her treatment team at the hospital recommended the transition happen quickly to minimize confusion and stress for her. I said, "Yes," Liam replied without hesitation. "For her." I stood up, my legs unsteady. 62 wasn't old, but in that moment, I felt ancient. I felt like everything I'd built, everything I'd sacrificed for, was crumbling around me. "I raised you in this house," I whispered. "And now you're helping us raise our family," Liam said, standing and walking over to me. For a moment, I thought he might hug me, might show some trace of the boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. Instead, he put his hands on my shoulders and looked me straight in the eye. "Mom, you said you didn't need much, remember? You've always preached about simplicity, about how love matters more than possessions. This is your chance to live those values." The manipulation was so smooth, so perfectly executed that I almost admired it. He was using my own words, my own philosophy, to justify stealing my home from under me. And Charlotte, sweet quiet Charlotte, who'd called me her second mother just last Christmas, stood there letting it happen. "I'll need time to pack," I said. "We'll help," Charlotte offered, but her voice was hollow. No, I walked toward the hallway, toward the bedroom where I'd slept for over 3 decades. "I'll do it myself." As I climbed the stairs, I could hear them whispering in the kitchen. Something about equity, investments, and medical expenses. About how this arrangement made the most financial sense for everyone. How the garage conversion had cost them $2,000 in materials and labor, as if that somehow balanced the scales. I sat on my bed and looked around the room. The antique dresser my mother had left me, the reading chair where I'd spent countless evenings, the window seat where I'd watched Liam learn to ride his bike in the driveway below. In a few hours, it would all belong to a woman I'd met exactly twice, whose son had just banished me to live among the lawnmower and holiday decorations. But as I began folding my clothes, something cold and hard crystallized in my chest. Liam wanted. He wanted to teach me about the value of simplicity. Fine, I'd give him a lesson he'd never forget. Yeah, the garage was exactly what you'd expect. Concrete floors, exposed beams, and the lingering smell of motor oil and fertilizer. They'd pushed my father's old workbench against one wall and set up a twin bed where my car used to park. A cheap plastic dresser sat in the corner, the kind you'd buy for a college dorm room. Charlotte had hung a curtain across one section, creating what she generously called privacy. "It's actually quite cozy," she said, setting down a box of my clothes. "And look, you have your own entrance through the side door. Complete independence." Independence. As if being exiled to my own garage was some kind of liberation. Liam carried in my television, the small one from the guest room, not the nice flat screen from my bedroom that was staying put for his mother-in-law, apparently. He plugged it into an extension cord and stood back, hands on his hips like he'd just completed a major home renovation project. "See all the comforts of home," he said. "And you're saving us a fortune in heating costs. The whole house stays warmer when we're not trying to heat that big master bedroom." I said nothing. I'd learned long ago that arguing with Liam when he'd made up his mind was like trying to reason with a hurricane. But I was watching, cataloging every word, every casual dismissal of my dignity. That evening, Mrs. Williams arrived. Liam's mother-in-law was a small bird-like woman who clutched Charlotte's arm and spoke in rapid Mandarin. She looked around the house with sharp, appraising eyes, taking inventory like a potential buyer at an estate sale. "This is my mother, Cora," Charlotte said, gesturing toward me. "Mom, this is Cora. She lives here too." Mrs. Williams nodded politely but said nothing to me in English. Charlotte translated something, and Mrs. Williams smiled and patted my arm before disappearing upstairs with Charlotte to inspect her new domain. "She's grateful," Liam explained. "She says, thank you for sharing your home." Sharing. That's what he called it. I excused myself and went to the garage. Through the thin walls, I could hear them moving furniture around upstairs. The sound of my bed being disassembled, my dresser being pushed aside. Mrs. Williams's voice carried down, chattering excitedly about something. Charlotte laughed, a genuine happy sound that cut through me like glass. I sat on the narrow bed and opened my laptop. If Liam wanted to play financial games, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. I pulled up the documents I'd signed 6 months ago when they'd first moved in and convinced me to let them help with expenses. The mortgage was still in my name, but I'd signed a power of attorney giving Liam authority to handle my financial affairs. It had seemed reasonable at the time. He was good with money, had experience with investment portfolios and market analysis. Business involved helping companies optimize their financial management systems. I trusted him completely. Now I read the fine print with different eyes. Liam had legal authority to make decisions about my property, my investments, even my medical care if I became incapacitated. The same kidney disease that had nearly killed him in his 20s could theoretically affect me too. Transplant recipients and their donors sometimes developed complications years later. It was rare but not unheard of. I pulled up my bank statements. Next, Liam hadn't lied. He and Charlotte had been covering the major expenses. But what I saw in the payment patterns told a different story. My Social Security and pension payments were being deposited into a joint account Liam had opened. He was managing my money like a portfolio, paying bills strategically to maximize his credit rating and tax benefits. The mortgage payments were coming from my funds, not his. Same with the property taxes, homeowners insurance, even the utility bills. Liam was essentially using my own money to pay for the privilege of living in my house, while making it look like he was supporting me. It was brilliant, really cruel but brilliant. I heard footsteps on the stairs and quickly closed the laptop. Liam appeared in the garage doorway, looking pleased with himself. "How are you settling in?" he asked. "Fine, good. Listen, we need to talk about some ground rules. Mrs. Williams is used to a very quiet household, especially in the evenings. Her treatment schedule means she needs plenty of rest." I looked at him. Treatment schedule? Physical therapy? Memory exercises? Doctor appointments? Charlotte's going to be driving her around a lot. It's actually good that you're out here. Gives them more privacy to focus on her recovery. And the kitchen? I asked. What about it? Am I allowed to use it? Liam frowned. Of course you're allowed. It's just maybe coordinate with Charlotte. She's planning to do most of the cooking now. Special dietary requirements for her mom's treatment. You understand? I understood perfectly. I was being systematically erased from my own life one room at a time. There's a mini fridge on order for out here, he continued. And a microwave. You'll have everything you need. Everything I needed to disappear completely. That night, I lay on the narrow mattress listening to the sounds of my house settling around me. Above, I could hear Mrs. Williams coughing, a harsh, persistent sound that echoed through the floorboards. Charlotte's voice murmured comfort in 2 languages. Liam's heavier footsteps moved back and forth between rooms. They turned my bedroom into a medical facility overnight. I could see the light from the window above and could imagine them arranging pill organizers and medical equipment on my antique dresser. The room where I'd recovered from my own surgery, the kidney donation that had saved Liam's life, was now serving someone else's health crisis. The irony was suffocating. Around midnight, I heard Liam and Charlotte talking. The kitchen, their voices carrying through the garage wall. She's taking this better than I expected, Charlotte said. I told you she would. Mom's always been practical about these things. She raised me to be self-sufficient, to make tough choices when necessary. Still feels weird though, like we're taking advantage. We're not taking advantage, Liam's voice hardened. We're managing a difficult situation. Mrs. Williams needs medical stability. We need financial stability. Mom needs to learn that the world doesn't revolve around her anymore. There it was, the truth behind all the careful justifications and financial maneuvering. This wasn't about helping Mrs. Williams or managing expenses. This was about Liam asserting control, about teaching me my place in his hierarchy. He'd been planning this. I realized the power of attorney, the joint bank account, the careful positioning of himself as my caretaker. It had all been building toward this moment. He'd created the perfect trap, using my own love and trust as the bait. But Liam had made one crucial miscalculation. He'd assumed that 20 years of being a devoted mother had made me weak, that I'd accept this humiliation because the alternative was losing him completely. He was about to learn how wrong he was. I opened my laptop again and began making calls. It was time to teach my son about the real cost of betrayal. The next morning brought the first real test of my new living arrangements. I woke at 6, a lifetime habit from my working years, and made my way through the side door into the main house. The kitchen was already occupied. Mrs. Williams sat at my table, sipping tea from my favorite china cup. Charlotte bustled around, preparing what looked like a complex breakfast involving multiple medications and dietary supplements. Liam stood at the counter, scrolling through his phone while coffee brewed in my machine. "Morning, Mom," he said without looking up. "How did you sleep?" "Fine." I moved toward the coffee maker, but Charlotte intercepted me with an apologetic smile. "Oh, Cora, I'm so sorry. I should have mentioned Mom needs her medications taken with specific timing. Her neurologist is very strict about the treatment protocol. Could you maybe give us about an hour for her morning routine?" I stared at her. An hour? Just while she adjusts to the new environment. Change can be really disorienting for dementia patients. The doctor emphasized maintaining consistent schedules and minimizing disruptions. Liam finally looked up. "There's instant coffee in the garage. Charlotte picked some up yesterday." Instant coffee in my own house. I turned around and walked back outside, closing the door with deliberate care. Through the window, I watched them continue their morning ballet around Mrs. Williams, who was now examining a pill organizer the size of a tackle box. Charlotte spoke to her in soothing Mandarin while Liam checked something on his tablet, probably his investment portfolio or market reports. I sat on the edge of my narrow bed and opened my laptop. Time to make some calls. My first conversation was with Janet Morrison, my attorney. We'd gone to high school together, and she'd handled my legal affairs for 20 years. Her voice was carefully neutral as I explained my situation. "Cora, I have to ask. Are you calling because you're genuinely concerned about the power of attorney arrangement or because you're upset about the living situation?" "Both," I said honestly. "But mostly because I think I made a mistake trusting Liam with complete financial authority." "Let me pull your file." I heard papers rustling. "Okay, looking at the documents you signed, this is a pretty comprehensive power of attorney. Liam can make decisions about your property, investments, and medical care if you're incapacitated. You really gave him broad authority. Can it be revoked?" "As long as you're mentally competent, yes." "But Cora, there could be complications if Liam contests it. He might argue that you're not making rational decisions, especially if there's been any kind of family conflict." I thought about that. Liam was smart enough to position any legal challenge as concern for my mental health. A 62-year-old woman suddenly revoking power of attorney after a family dispute wouldn't look good. "What about the house itself?" I asked. "Still entirely in your name. The power of attorney gives him authority to make financial decisions, but he can't transfer property ownership without your explicit consent on specific documents." "Good. I'll be in touch." My second call was to Dr. Patricia Williams, my nephrologist. I'd been seeing her for annual follow-ups since my kidney donation, monitoring for any long-term complications. She was surprised to hear from me between appointments. "Cora, is everything all right? Are you experiencing any symptoms?" "No symptoms," I said. "But I have some questions about my medical records and privacy rights." "Of course. If someone has power of attorney for my financial affairs, does that give them access to my medical information?" "Not automatically, no. Medical power of attorney is separate from financial." "Why do you ask?" I explained the situation carefully, watching through the garage window as Charlotte helped Mrs. Williams walk slowly around the backyard. The old woman moved like her bones were made of glass, each step carefully considered. "I see," Dr. Williams said when I finished. "Cora, I'm going to be direct with you. What you're describing sounds like financial elder abuse. I'm mandated to report situations like this." "I'm not asking you to report anything," I said quickly. "I'm asking about my options." "Well, medically speaking, you're in excellent health for someone your age, especially considering the kidney donation. Your labs have been perfect, blood pressure stable, no signs of kidney disease or complications. You're competent to make your own medical and financial decisions. And if someone tried to argue otherwise, they'd need documented medical evidence of cognitive decline or incapacity. You don't have any such documentation in your file. Perfect. My third call. Harold Williams was Mrs. Williams's son-in-law and Charlotte's brother. I'd met him at Liam and Charlotte's wedding, and I remembered him as thoughtful and direct. He worked in venture capital, analyzing investment opportunities and corporate mergers. If anyone would understand the financial implications of what Liam was doing, it would be Harold. Mrs. Cora, this is unexpected. Is everything all right with my mother-in-law? Your mother-in-law is fine, I said. I'm calling about the living arrangements Liam and Charlotte have made. I laid out the situation methodically, the power of attorney, the financial manipulation, my displacement to the garage. Harold listened without interrupting. Jesus, he said finally. I had no idea. Charlotte told us you'd offered to let Mom stay in your house, that you were excited about having company. That's not exactly how it happened. I'm getting that impression. Mrs. Cora, can I ask you something? Do you have documentation of your financial situation before Liam moved in? Yes, bank statements, investment records, everything. Good, because what you're describing sounds like a textbook case of financial exploitation. And if Liam's using your mother-in-law's medical needs to justify it, that makes it even worse. What would you do? I asked. Harold was quiet for a long moment. Honestly, I'd burn it all down. But that's easy for me to say. She's not my son. But that's exactly what I was planning to do. That afternoon, I made my final call to Marcus Webb, a private investigator Janet had recommended. Marcus specialized in financial crimes and family disputes. Mrs. Henderson, I understand you need some research done on your son's business and financial activities. That's right. I want to know everything. His consulting clients, business partnerships, investment strategies, tax filings if possible. I want to understand exactly how he's been managing money, both his own and mine. Any particular timeline? The last 2 years, but especially the last 6 months. And the purpose of this investigation. I looked through the garage window at my house, where Mrs. Williams was now napping in my bedroom while Charlotte organized medications on my antique dresser. Liam was in the living room taking a video call with what looked like potential clients, gesturing enthusiastically as he pitched his financial management expertise. I want to know if my son is as good with money as he claims to be, I said. And I want leverage. Understood. I'll need a retainer. How much? $5,000 to start. I smiled grimly. I'll transfer it today. That evening, I sat in the garage listening to my family, because that's what Liam would call them now, his new family, sharing dinner in my dining room. Mrs. Williams's voice mixed with Charlotte's translation and Liam's hearty laughter. They sounded happy, content, like they'd finally found their perfect domestic arrangement. Liam knocked on the garage door around 9 o'clock. Hey, Mom, just checking in. How was your first full day? Educational, I said. He frowned slightly. What do you mean? I learned a lot about my legal rights, my medical privacy, my financial options. Very educational. Mom, you're not thinking of doing anything rash, are you? Because if you're having trouble adjusting to the new arrangement, we can talk about it. Maybe find you a nice senior community somewhere with activities and people your own age. There it was, the implicit threat. Comply with his plans or he'd have me warehoused in some institutional setting where I'd be even more isolated and powerless. I'm adjusting just fine, I said. Don't worry about me. He studied my face, looking for signs of rebellion or distress. Finding neither, he relaxed. Good. Charlotte's really grateful, you know. Her mom seems so much happier already. You're doing a good thing here. After he left, I opened my laptop and began typing. If Liam wanted to play games with family loyalty and financial manipulation, I'd give him a masterclass in both. But first, I needed to gather all the ammunition I could find. Marcus Webb would have his preliminary report within a week. Janet Morrison was already drafting papers to revoke the power of attorney. Dr. Williams had agreed to provide a written assessment of my mental competency. And tomorrow, I'd begin phase 2 of my education. I was going to learn everything I could about Liam's business, his clients, his reputation in the financial consulting world. My son had made the mistake of thinking that 20 years of motherly devotion had made me soft. He was about to discover that the same fierce protectiveness I'd once used to defend him could be turned against him with devastating efficiency. The mother who had given him her kidney was gone. In her place sat someone much more dangerous, a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to gain from his destruction. Marcus Webb's preliminary report arrived exactly 1 week later, delivered to a P.O. box I'd rented across town. I drove there in my old Honda, the same car that no longer had a home in my own garage, and sat in the parking lot reading 47 pages that changed everything. Liam's consulting business was a house of cards. His biggest client, Meridian Financial Group, was under SEC investigation for fraudulent investment schemes. 2 other companies he'd advised had filed for bankruptcy within the past year. His own tax returns showed massive losses that he'd been hiding through creative accounting and shell company transfers. But the most damning information was about his medical history. Liam had lied about his kidney disease being genetic. According to his insurance records, it had been caused by years of prescription drug abuse, painkillers he'd been stealing and selling during college, damaging his kidneys beyond repair. He'd let me believe it was hereditary, let me think I might face the same disease, all while knowing he'd caused his own condition through criminal negligence. I'd given him my kidney to save him from the consequences of his own drug dealing. The rage that filled me, as cold and pure, like liquid nitrogen in my veins, I sat in that parking lot for 2 hours reading every detail, memorizing every date and transaction. When I finally drove back to what used to be my home, I was no longer the woman who had been banished to the garage. I was something else entirely. That evening, Harold Williams called. "Mrs. Cora, I've been doing some research on my own about Liam's business practices and the companies he's been working with, and you need to get away from him soon. There's going to be fallout from the SEC investigation, and anyone associated with his consulting work could be implicated." "What kind of fallout?" "Financial ruin, possible criminal charges, certainly civil litigation. The investors who lost money are going to come after everyone who touched their funds, including financial advisors and consultants." I smiled grimly. "How soon?" "Weeks, maybe a month at most. The investigation is moving fast." "Harold, can I ask you something? If you were in my position, what would you do?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I'd make sure I was nowhere near the blast radius when it all exploded, and I'd make sure Liam couldn't drag me down with him." "What about your mother-in-law?" "I'll handle that." "Charlotte doesn't know about Liam's business problems, does she?" "I don't think so." "Then she's going to need family support when this all comes out. Mom can come stay with us. We have plenty of room. And frankly, she'll be safer away from Liam when the investigators start knocking on doors." Perfect. The next morning, I implemented phase 1 of my plan. I walked into the kitchen where Charlotte was preparing Mrs. Williams's medication routine and sat down at my own table. "Charlotte, we need to talk." She looked up, startled. "Of course. Is everything okay?" "That depends. How much do you know about Liam's consulting business?" Her face went carefully blank. "What do you mean?" I pulled out a folder containing copies of the SEC documents Marcus had obtained. "I mean, do you know that his biggest client is under federal investigation for fraud? Do you know that 2 of his other clients have filed for bankruptcy? Do you know that when this all comes out, you could lose everything?" Charlotte's hands trembled as she read through the papers. Mrs. Williams watched from the table, sensing the tension even without understanding the English. "This can't be right," Charlotte whispered. "Liam said business was good, that we were going to be financially stable again." "Liam has been lying to both of us," I said. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" She looked up at me, tears starting to form. "What do you mean?" "Your brother Harold is expecting your call." He's ready to offer your mother a place to stay while you figure out your next move. Harold? You talked to Harold. I talked to Harold because I was concerned about your mother's welfare. When Liam's business collapses, and it will collapse very soon, this house could be seized as part of the investigation. Your mother needs to be somewhere safe. Charlotte stared at me, processing the weight of the situation. Read at the documents, then at her mother, then back at me. You're trying to break up my marriage. I'm trying to save your life, I said. And your mother's life. Liam is going down, Charlotte. You can go down with him, or you can get out while you still can. Mrs. Williams said something in Mandarin. Charlotte answered, her voice shaking. The old woman's expression grew concerned, and she reached out to pat Charlotte's hand. She's asking what's wrong, Charlotte said. Tell her the truth. Tell her that Liam has been lying about his business, that there might be legal problems, that Harold wants her to come stay with him where she'll be safe. Charlotte translated, speaking rapidly. Mrs. Williams listened, asked several sharp questions, then sat back with a grim expression. She spoke to Charlotte in a tone that brooked no argument. She says she wants to call Harold herself. She wants to know why no one told her about problems before. Because no one else knew, I said. I only found out because I hired someone to investigate. You hired a private investigator? Charlotte's voice was barely a whisper. I hired someone to find out what Liam was really doing with my money in my house. What I found out was that your husband is a criminal who's been using both of us to hide his illegal activities. Mrs. Williams stood up abruptly and walked to the window, looking out at the garage where I'd been living. She spoke to Charlotte without turning around. She says she's ashamed that her daughter married a man who would put his own mother in the garage. She says in her culture that's the worst kind of dishonor. Your mother is a wise woman, I said. Charlotte was crying now, quiet tears that dripped onto the SEC documents. What am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? You're supposed to call your brother and get your mother out of here before the FBI shows up. You're supposed to file for divorce and distance yourself from Liam's business as much as possible. And you're supposed to do it today. Today. I pulled out another folder, this one containing the revocation of power of attorney that Janet had prepared. Because tomorrow I'm filing these papers to revoke Liam's authority over my finances. And once I do that, he's going to realize that I know everything. He's going to become desperate, and desperate men do dangerous things. Mrs. Williams turned from the window and spoke to Charlotte in rapid, urgent Mandarin. Charlotte nodded and pulled out her phone. She says to call Harold now. She says we pack today and leave tonight. Smart woman. As Charlotte made the call, I walked upstairs to my former bedroom. Mrs. Williams's medical equipment was scattered across my antique dresser, her medications lined up on my vanity. It looked like a hospital room, sterile and temporary. I began gathering her things, folding her clothes with the same care I'd once used for Liam's belongings when he was small. But this time it wasn't an act of love, it was an act of strategy. By the time Liam came home from his afternoon client meeting, Harold was already on his way to collect his family. Charlotte had packed 2 suitcases and was helping her mother down the stairs. What's going on? Liam asked, looking around at the luggage and boxes. We're leaving. Charlotte said simply. Leaving? What do you mean leaving? I stepped out of the kitchen, still holding the folder with his business records. She means she found out about your SEC problems, your bankrupt clients, and your criminal history. Liam's face went white. Mom, what did you do? I did what you should have done years ago, I said. I told the truth. The silence that followed my words was deafening. Liam stood in the doorway, watching his wife help her mother toward the exit, his face cycling through disbelief, rage, and finally calculating desperation. Charlotte, wait, he said, his voice taking on that manipulative tone I'd heard him use in business calls. Whatever my mother told you, she's been under a lot of stress lately. The living arrangement has been hard on her, and I think she might be having some cognitive issues. Charlotte stopped at the door and turned around. Her eyes were red from crying, but her voice was steady. Liam, I saw the SEC documents. I called Harold. I know about Meridian Financial, about the bankruptcy filings, about everything. Those are just temporary setbacks. Every consultant faces challenges with difficult clients. The market has been volatile, and the prescription drug dealing in college. I interrupted. The real reason you needed a kidney transplant, was that just a temporary setback too? The color drained from Liam's face completely. Charlotte's sharp intake of breath was the only sound in the room. That's in the past, he stammered. I was young. I made mistakes. You let me believe it was genetic, I said, my voice calm and cold. You let me think I might develop the same disease. You let me give you my kidney to save you from the consequences of your own criminal behavior. Mrs. Williams spoke sharply in Mandarin. Charlotte translated automatically, her voice hollow. She says she wants to know if the man who put his mother in the garage is also a drug dealer. I am not a drug dealer. Liam exploded. That was 20 years ago. I was in college. I had debts. I made some bad choices, but I'm not that person anymore. No, I said. Now you're a person who commits financial fraud and abuses his elderly mother. Much better. Harold's car pulled into the driveway, and Mrs. Williams immediately headed for the door. Charlotte followed, but Liam grabbed her arm. You can't leave me, he said. Not now, Charlotte. I love you. We can work through this. She pulled away from him. You lied to me about everything, your business, your health, your past. You made me complicit in stealing from your mother. I didn't steal anything. This is her house. She's still living here, in the garage. Liam, you moved your mother into the garage so your mother-in-law could have her bedroom. It was temporary. Everything with you is temporary. Charlotte said. The only permanent thing is the damage you leave behind. She walked out the door without looking back. Mrs. Williams was already in Harold's car, and within minutes they were gone. Liam stood at the window watching the taillights disappear, his shoulders shaking. You destroyed my marriage, he said without turning around. I saved it. Charlotte deserves better than spending her life cleaning up your messes and covering for your crimes. He spun around, and for a moment I saw the boy he used to be, confused, angry, looking for someone else to blame for his problems. What do you want from me? He asked. I pulled out the power of attorney revocation papers. I want my house back. I want my finances back. I want my life back. And if I don't agree, you don't have a choice. I'm filing these papers tomorrow morning, and then I'm calling the SEC to tell them about the financial elder abuse. I'm sure they'll be very interested to know how you've been using your mother's assets to hide your business losses. Liam laughed bitterly. You think you're so smart. You think you've won, but you have no idea what you've done. Enlighten me. When the SEC investigation concludes, when the civil lawsuits start, they're going to freeze all assets connected to my business. That includes this house, your bank accounts, everything. You'll have nothing. The house is in my name only. My personal accounts are separate from your business. Janet Morrison made sure of that when I hired her to untangle the mess you made of my finances. His face went ashen. You hired Janet? I hired Janet. I hired a private investigator. I consulted with my doctor about my mental competency. And I informed Charlotte's family about your criminal history. Did you really think I'd just sit in that garage and accept what you did to me? Liam sank into a chair, my chair, and put his head in his hands. Mom, please. I know I made mistakes, but I was trying to protect you. The financial markets are complicated, and I thought. Stop. I walked over and stood in front of him. Do you want to know what I thought about while I was lying in that garage listening to strangers use my house? I thought about the night you were diagnosed with kidney failure. He looked up at me, hope flickering in his eyes. I thought about how terrified I was that I might lose you. How I would have done anything, given anything to save your life. I thought about the surgery. How proud I was to be a match. How honored I felt to give you part of myself. The hope in his eyes was growing. And then I thought about what kind of man lets his mother live in a garage. What kind of man steals from the person who literally gave him life? What kind of man builds his entire adult existence on lies and manipulation? The hope died. The answer is simple, Liam. The kind of man who was never worth saving in the first place. He flinched as if I'd struck him. You don't mean that. I mean every word. I walked to the stairs and began carrying down the last of my belongings. From what used to be my bedroom, Liam sat in stunned silence as I moved my antique dresser, my reading chair, my photographs, and keepsakes. Everything that made this house my home. Where are you going? He asked finally. Somewhere that appreciates what I have to offer, I said. I'm 62 years old, I'm in excellent health, and I have a substantial nest egg that's about to be completely free from your mismanagement. I'm going to buy a new house, maybe travel. Definitely find better ways to spend my time than worrying about ungrateful children. Mom, you can't just leave. I'm your son. I stopped at the door and looked back at him. He was sitting alone in my living room, surrounded by the ruins of his marriage and his business, facing federal investigation and financial ruin. He looked smaller, somehow diminished. No, I said. You're a stranger who happens to share my DNA. My son died the day he decided his mother was disposable. I loaded the last box into my car and drove away without looking back. 3 weeks later, I was settling into my new condo downtown when Harold called to update me. The SEC had filed formal charges against Liam and 3 of his associates. Meridian Financial's assets were frozen, and several civil lawsuits had been filed by defrauded investors. Liam's consulting business was finished. What about Charlotte? I asked. Divorce papers were filed yesterday. She's staying with us while she looks for her own place. Mom's doing much better. Turns out she was more confused by the medication interactions than actual dementia. The new doctors have her on a much simpler treatment plan. And Liam? The house is in foreclosure. He's been calling Charlotte constantly, begging her to come back, but she's blocked his number. I felt no satisfaction in his misery, no triumph in his downfall. I felt nothing at all. That evening, I sat on my new balcony overlooking the city, drinking wine from a crystal glass I'd bought that afternoon. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Mom, please call me. I need help. I'm sorry for everything. I love you. I deleted the message without responding. Some people might call me heartless. They might say that forgiveness is divine, that family should come first, that everyone deserves a second chance. Those people have never been betrayed by their own child, never been discarded like garbage by the person they died to protect. Liam wanted my forgiveness. He should have thought about that before he closed the garage door and reminded me that I'd said I didn't need much. He was right about one thing. I didn't need much, but what I did need, I deserve to keep, and I'd never need him again. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is teach someone that actions have consequences. Some lessons can only be learned the hard way. Thanks for staying until the end. You understand now, don't you?